Now in the US, the Obama administration is due to unveil new rules tomorrow Australian time aimed at limiting carbon emissions from power plants. The measures are part of the US president's plan to combat climate change, bypassing Congress in favour of regulation by the states. Michael Hiscox is the Clarence Dillon Professor of International Affairs at Harvard University. His research focuses on environmental practices for business as well as international trade, foreign investment and immigration. He's in Australia for the Behavioural Exchange Conference organised by the US Study Centre at Sydney University. And Michael Hiscox joins us now. Welcome to The Drum.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
Now, I know a million theses can be and have been written on this subject, but can you just explain to us the basic principles of behavioural economics?
Sure, yeah. I think, the behavioural economics revolution is all about a bunch of economists and psychologists questioning the standard assumptions of traditional economics, which were really that we're all kind of very rational, calculating machines, able to take in a lot of information and make good choices about what was best for us, usually focusing on our material self-interest. And a lot of the evidence that's from very rigorous experimentation now suggests that, in fact, most of us are not like that. We have a lot of trouble with, well, for a start, we often think about others. We're quite altruistic, which is relevant to the discussion of the Obama policy.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, that's good news. We also
In which circumstances are we altruistic?
So if we have a hard time passing by others who are in need, we have a hard time not reciprocating when people do good things for us. We have a hard time not contributing to the collective good when we put in a situation where we think it's important and others are part of the team. So it's generally good news in that sense. We're much more generous than traditional economics gives us credit for. We also care a lot about what others think of us. So we're very, very much worried about what the norm is in a given situation, what's appropriate behaviour, what's good behaviour, what will be regarded as estimable. So that's all good news, I think. In the bad news category, there are lots of us who have trouble making complex decisions about things where the outcomes are uncertain and will take place a long time in the future. Financial planning is a classic one. People have a hard time dealing with personal finance. That's a big issue.
And why is that? It's the uncertainty of it.
It is. It's a lot of information. It's a complex set of decisions that have to be made. People in general, financial literacy is low generally among the population in the US and in Australia. And it's a lot of information, and it's about outcomes where there's a lot of uncertainty and they will take place a long time in the future. So we all tend to procrastinate.
So what about bill paying? I mean, there's an initiative by the New South Wales government about simplifying the bill to make people more likely to pay. Is that resonant with your research?
It is, yeah. So a lot of what Behavioural Insights do, I'm part of this Behavioural Insights group at Harvard who are in town for the conference, and a lot of what we focus on is making choices simpler. And arranging the choice architecture so it's easier for people to make good decisions about what's best for them. So simplification is a big part of that.
So what would you advise Obama in trying to sell the message with carbon emissions?
It's a hard one. I know we've had our own experience here in Australia with selling carbon pricing. So I think I've done some work with companies on sustainability initiatives and how the extent to which customers respond to these things and want to make donations in particular or offset their activities in terms of offsetting the carbon emissions. So typically what we focus on is this innate altruism or tendency towards pro-social behaviour when given the right kinds of options and information. So a lot of people focus on different motivations for doing good, and the simplest is pure altruism, where people feel that if they get good information about, if I make a donation to this cause, whether it be reducing emissions or helping poor people, that the money will be well spent. It will change outcomes in a good way. So making clearer the information about how this policy initiative will lead to better outcomes for people in the next generation.
Seems like the complete opposite to how carbon change played out in Australia.
Absolutely, I think so, yeah.
And what was that about? Was that about first up, allowing it to be called a tax instead of a price?
Obviously a big mistake. So framing is a very big part of the behavioural message, is that people are very, very sensitive to losses, for example, and there's no way to think of a tax other than as a potential loss. And so framing the policy immediately as a loss rather than as a way to ensure better outcomes in the future, focusing on gains, is a big problem.
Right. So you also probably have to trust the corporation if they're telling you they're ethical, if they're telling you they're making, doing carbon pricing. Is that right?
Exactly. So there's a big focus on credibility, and where do we get trust and credibility? And so having independent third parties, whether they be scientists or experts or fair trade certifications or others, having them certified that what you're doing, what you're proposing, will have a good impact on outcomes is a key part of it.
Right. So convincing that but which of all the environmental measures that have been introduced by companies, from carbon offsets to fair trade to we've changed our supply system, which, in a nutshell, because we're almost out of time, are consumers most likely to respond to?
So one of the biggest ones is feeling good about what you're doing. So this is what we call impure altruism as opposed to pure altruism. So letting people feel good about what they're doing is big.